Yes. What it would suggest is polytheism, more than one God. Okay? To a untrained mind, etc. Let us. There's a community here. Okay? And that creates a challenge as we're going to look at as he goes on. Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Now, if you come to that with no bias, and what I'm talking about is when you're raised in a family, you're given a Christian bias. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that that's the mindset or the filter through which you look. If you just looked at this as the first time you've ever heard that, what conclusion might you come to? Okay, and how man was created just like God, how does then man reflect his creator? Let us. Who are the us? Okay, that hadn't been revealed to us. You're going with your bias. Pardon me? Okay. What does the reflection suggest about God? What does it suggest about us? Let us create man. Yes, being male and female. Now, there are many, many world religions that have male and female gods. Okay? Baal is represented as male. Ashtaroth, female. You look at Greek religion, males and females. Okay? Now, I want to stop just as a little bit of a side excursus here. Why do you think the Greeks created in their minds gods that if you studied any Greek mythology, there were wars, there were battles, there were all kinds of things among. Why do you think humans would create a multiplicity of gods who are violent, who are sometimes oversexed, who are all of those kinds? What do you think? Let me start with one bias. Apparently, because every civilization that's ever been has had gods. They worship something. There appears to be in human beings a God desire or seeking outside of self for what AA would call a higher power. Why do you think the Greeks would produce gods that, I mean, it's interesting reading. Okay. Now, creating something in your image, what are you seeking? Why not? Why have gods that are no better than you are? If you're going to have a god, the idea of having a god is something that controls or directs or whatever. Why would you create in your mind something that, or a system of beings that are so fallible, so human? All right, I want you to think about that. There's going to be some other challenges and statements that God makes about, and they are the defining statements, I am statements. And I want you to think from the perspective of of a culture that is very, very God confused, and we are as a culture. We don't know really who, and in our culture, the accepted thing is to respect everybody's religion. Okay, we have become a very multi-religious, very inclusive, and that means that I don't have to agree with your religion, but I have to respect it. Have to respect that religion is significant to you, etc. And guys, that's that's really a cultural response to back in the old days when Christians looked at everybody else as savages and pagans that are kind of almost subhuman. And that's why the Crusades, we're going to go destroy them, or the Inquisition, we're going to torture them into Christianity. That's why, as I was talking about last week, that indigenous groups in Alaska, when Christian missionaries came in there, they repressed them, they changed their names, they did all of the things that Babylon was trying to do with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do you remember their original names? Do you remember their Hebrew names? See, it worked. Because most of us, if I list their Hebrew names, you wouldn't recognize them. You know them by their Babylonian names, and those names are reflective of Babylonian gods. Okay, they were trying to force feed them, trying to proselytize them into becoming Babylonian by all kinds of pressures. And for 3 years, they were trained in arts and science and religion and all that kind of. Anyway, that's the way the world works. Now, God is going to make some statements. If you want to turn to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. First introduction we have to God is that he's plural. So, let us make man in our image. Yet it's a little bit confusing because he said, God created in his own image. He. It starts with us. God's talking to somebody. And then he says, he. Okay, so now, let me throw another wrench into it. Something you're aware of. The word God, Elohim, root word is El. And you add on to it endings like Eli. Jesus cried out on the cross. My God, Eli is mine, El is God. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. He was calling on El, all right? In the Old Testament, several names, but Elohim is the root, and I am is plural. So the word God is plurality. Now, again, we understand that as Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but what I'm saying is the introduction to it. If someone started investigating Christianity and just started reading this, the first conclusion they would come to is God is a community, and he created males and females so that to represent him in his image. So his image is male and female. That would be a very natural kind of assumption to come to. Deuteronomy 5, verse 6. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now in Deuteronomy chapter 5, also in Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, you have the same thing. Now this is the beginning of the Ten Commandments. Given in Exodus, Deuteronomy means second law or twice law. Deuteronomy is revisiting the law. Here's the law again. It's not part two, it's a reamplification of it, a review, if you will. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, I read that as an unbiased person. What does that suggest? Pardon me? Okay. Control of what? Hang on. Yes. Yes. Is he acknowledging multiple gods? Yes. Now we're going to get to what this means, but he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Did he bring the world out of Egypt? No. Who did he bring out of Egypt? Israel. I am your God. Now, he didn't say, I am exclusively your God. He said, it means, I am exclusive the God. He said, I am your God. You shall have no other gods. Translations say before me. The word literally is face, in my face. Probably more accurately translated, you shall have no other gods in my presence. Is he acknowledging other gods? Yes. Do other gods exist? Pardon me? All right. Let's not let our bias get ahead of our rediscovery, all right? We don't know yet. He is saying there are other gods, so there are other gods. Now, if we stop here, if we start with Genesis and we come here, then it's easy to assume there are a multiplicity of gods, just like the Greeks had, just like in India, etc. And by the way, probably the projection of many gods is those gods battle together to establish supremacy. Guys, what we're always seeking is who's in charge. And if you have a committee of gods who are arguing and fighting and all of that, you don't know who's in charge. You don't know who ultimately, and this is what we do. Ultimate authority for what we're trying to teach or share is either the police or God. What I mean is, if you keep doing that, you're going to get arrested. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to go before a court and all that. And police represent law enforcement. God represents law enforcement and enforcement of what is right, enforcement of what is wrong, how we should live, how we shouldn't live, etc. Man is seeking guidance, man is seeking direction, but he's also seeking perfection. Do you see that in humans? That we seek perfection. Fall short of it, but guys, I mean, we put 13-year-old little girls on a mat and expect them to score a 10. And they're human. You know, what's a perfect baseball game? No score. Didn't get a hit. The pursuit of perfection is going to be reflected off who we choose as our God. Create, sure, but we're creating something to go beyond ourselves. Like I said, as Alcoholics Anonymous said, a higher power. Why do we seek a higher power as humans? Well, first answer, God put that in us. But why? Why the search for this? Why? Do what? Okay. Exactly. Okay, now explain. Therefore, yes.
I think sometimes it's to explain the inexplicable too. I often think about the time of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They came off the ark. They outlived their seventh great grandson. You're born into that culture where grandpa's dead,
Yes.
And I'm fallible, I'm human, what's going on here? All kinds of stories are born from that type of thing.
All right, to explain the inexplicable, and that's why in your homeowner's insurance and all that, there's a phrase that says act of God. That's a meteor falling on your house. In other words, there's floods, there's fires, etc., and then there are things that just happen and we don't understand why they happen, so we call them an act of God. God didn't like your house. So he sent a meteor from Mars to destroy your house, okay? What does that give us? If we can, and what we do with the inexplicable is we just explain it away. In other words, give it to God. And what does that give us? Say again? Peace of mind. Exactly. It gives us a sense in a very chaotic world that there's purpose and meaning and there's someone at the switch. And that way we can, guys, I tell you, one of the worst things that has been perpetrated on humanity is the idea that there is no God because we are all an accident of biology. Darwinism and things like that, which to estimate how much that undermines purpose, meaning. And if you look around and you see how much meaninglessness there is in people's lives, what's the point? Why live? Why suffer? Why struggle? Why? It's meaningless. And it's very, not only depressing, it just undermines everything, become very feudalistic. And that's exactly what Romans chapter 1 describes. Because they didn't know God, their minds became dark. Do you see darkness permeating our culture? And where it's come from is the idea there's nobody in charge. And if there's nobody in charge, there's no hope that it's going to get better. And then we throw in the second law of thermodynamics, the first three laws of thermodynamics, that everything is moving toward a higher state of entropy, which means chaos. The sun's burning out, the earth is spinning, it's going to spin itself down. It's just, what's the point? And see, one of the things that brings you security and peace of mind, etc., when you lay your head on your pillow at night, when everything is going south, is God's in control. And the greater your faith in that, the greater your peace of mind. And so when humans create gods, they have to have those gods because it's like Steve said, it's a reverse order. We build them in our image, gods. And if they're in our image is limited. So they have to battle it out to become supreme. Then we can ultimately hope in that system perfecting a God or a co-God that can control everything. And so we have mighty gods like Hercules and Achilles, but Achilles has his heel because he's human. We can't trust him totally. He's powerful, he's mighty, but he's limited. And because of that limit, Superman has his kryptonite. Humanity is seeking for a higher power that allows us to live not just with peace of mind, but with purpose and meaning, and that we're moving somewhere. And I want us to go through this exercise today about this confusing notion because I want you to try to put yourself into the mindset of someone that doesn't have that. It has no hope. Heard a comedian. There are things every once in a while just pop up and it just shows you how we've gotten. There was a comedian, I was watching his video, and he's got a unique style. Anyway, he was saying, I believe in science. I follow it religiously. Now, you're smiling. And the audience laughed. The idea of following science religiously is a non sequitur. It doesn't follow. That's what's happened in American culture, is you have to accept one or the other. You can't follow science religiously. You have to follow it scientifically. This comedian is very good about play on words, but it really illustrated, and the laughter is what illustrated. It's not only ha, it was the laugh out loud kind of a thing, because our culture has created a violent war between knowledge and religion. Now, when you do that, you no longer have God. When you no longer have God, all of these things that we're talking about. So when people act stupid, I don't want you to perceive them as stupid. I want you to understand that they have no hope or purpose or whatever. So they seek pleasure. They seek addiction to get away from the hopelessness. It's why in the 60s it was called an LSD trip. It was a vacation from the stressors of your life and Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. And you needed to take a trip. Do you have to come back from the trip? Yes. When you come back from the trip, are you going to have the same issues that you left? Yes. Plus one of addiction. But I don't care right now. I just need escape from this hopelessness. So this exercise in who is God is very, very important. And this exercise in who does God say that he is very, very important. But what I want you to notice is some of the statements that he makes, which he's trying to teach us, at the same time become very confused in their application. I want you to think about you're a 5-year-old Jewish child, and mom or dad is reading the Torah to you, and a Jewish 5-year-old child says, Daddy, why does it say Elohim? Why does it say gods? And that's literally what it says. Why does it say gods? What does that Jewish father answer? Now, you can't go into Father, Son, and Holy Spirit because there is no theology of that yet. What does he say to his child? Do you understand the confusion of the child? Have no other gods before me. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Why didn't God close the door by saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one and only? Now, I want you to see the built-in kind of confusion here. Literally, it says, Yahweh, personal name, is our gods. Elohim is plural. Yahweh is our gods. Yahweh is one. Isn't that confusing? The Lord your God, usually, especially in the Pentateuch, first 5 books, when you see the word God, generally it's Elohim. When you see the word Lord, generally it's Yahweh, God's covenant relation, his personal name, covenant relationship with Israel. The Jews would not say his name, Yahweh. So what they would do is, if you were reading and Yahweh was in the text, you would say Adonai, Lord. You didn't say his name. Why? Why do you think they didn't speak his name? Any ideas? Okay. Which commandment? Don't use the Lord's name in vain. If I don't use it, I can never use it in vain. But I want you to see the statement. He doesn't here say, he says the Lord is one. He says that after saying Yahweh is our gods. Yahweh is one. That's literally what he said. Why didn't he say, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our El, singular. Yahweh is one and only. See, he could have settled this thing about, it's like he's leaving the door open for other gods. Your God is one. Or literally, your God's is one. Confusing? Yes. Now, let's go back to the 5-year-old. Daddy, why does it say gods? I thought Yahweh was one. And that Jewish father doesn't have the theology, doesn't have the revelation to say, well, Elohim is community. It's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which would be very confusing. That would be a multiplicity of gods. So what the father would say was, God is so big, he's talked about in the plural. Because singular can't contain the majesty of God. It's like the old joke of back when they had penny scales. You could put a penny in it and get on it and weigh yourself, and it would give you a fortune. And guy got on it, put the penny in, and the fortune came out, and it said, next time, please, one at a time. That's plurality of majesty, okay? And that's what the Jewish father would have told his child. God speaks of himself in the plural because he's massive. Is that confusing? Well, Dad, you're pretty big. Should I talk about you in the plural? Eli was pretty big. Should we talk about him in the plural? Yeah, but he's not big enough. How many pounds do you have to be plural? I mean, think of a 5-year-old child, okay? Yahweh is our gods. Yahweh is one. He has not yet made a case for onlyness. So we go back. Does God believe in other gods? Yes. No. Yes and no. I mean, he said it. Have no other gods.
These were people that were 400 years been steeped in a culture that believed in multiple gods. This was the way he had the path, the avenue he had to take to get them to understand that there's
They're steeped in that. Israel was polytheistic long before it was monotheistic. We break down those words. Israel believed in many gods long before they believed in one God. And I would argue to you that it was rare in the history of Israel that they believed in one God, even though he taught and taught and taught. 40 years in the wilderness. And what did Joshua say before they crossed? Get rid of the gods that you brought from Egypt. As for me and my family, we will serve Elohim. I mean, why are you grandstanding if they have one God? Because in their tents, they had graven images. It's hard to let go of the gods of your childhood when you believe those childhood gods protected you, provided for you, etc. And so we'll add a God in and we'll worship him, and we become polytheistic. We worship this one for this one for this one for this. But the biggest one is God. And so in their minds, God was a bigger God than the other gods. But they have gone through 40 years with just, and not just that, all of the things that God did in the plagues, not to prove anything to the Egyptians, it was to prove to the Israelites who their God is. They don't know him. Moses didn't know him. And so we find out he's Elohim. We already have had Elohims. We've had multiple gods. Now we've got a God who himself is multiple gods. He's plural. Now he's not. We understand that through Revelation, but teaching polytheistic people to be monotheistic by calling yourself by a polytheistic name is confusing. He's not ready to reveal to them what that means. And so they only understand it within the context of their mindset. Please understand, many people in the world have no problem with you serving God, Yahweh, as long as you leave their gods alone. But your God tells you to get rid of everybody else's gods. And that's why there are so many heathens, pagans, whatever, that hate Christianity, because your God is a belligerent God among all these gods. Okay.
You grow up in that culture, their gods were very limited. They were not omnipresent. You know, if I had a sun god or a wind god, fire god, moon, there was gods attributed to just about everything.
Right.
What he's saying is, I'm all of those in one. You know, I'm the one place that you can come where everything is going to be, you know, I take care of everything. Did some get it? Maybe. I think most of them did not. But, I mean, that's exactly what. Attribute everything that you worship to.
Now, let's take this, see if I have time to do this. Let's take this polytheistic view and let's bring it into Christianity. Now, what Terrell was just saying is, in most ancient civilizations, you had either a bunch of lesser gods or you had less number of bigger gods. What were they over? You had gods over crops. You had gods over weather. You had gods over all kinds of things. Now, you either had a god to handle everything that we have to deal with, or you had lesser gods and they each had a broader territory to be responsible for. So what Yahweh did is he attacked many of the Egyptian gods in the presence of Israel. Now, what do they get from that? He's bigger than this God. He's bigger than this God. He's big. If you live in Egypt, in northern Africa, you're dependent on the Nile River. Period. It has to flood, and it does. And when you flood, you're able to raise crops and all that kind of stuff. Okay. If it doesn't do that, it's basically a desert. So, is there life in the Nile? Yes. Life comes from the Nile. It teams with life, plus it produces for us life. Is there a God of the Nile? Yes. Because we need it to flood, so we need to think that there is a mind behind that providing for us. What did God do with that God? He turned it to blood. He turned it to death. I don't know how long it stayed blood, but how long does it take blood to start coagulating it? Get really foul. Now, what did they learn from that? What he's trying to teach them is the Lord your God's is one. What they take away, or some get that, what many take away is he's bigger than the God of the Nile. That doesn't negate the God of the Nile, it's just Yahweh is bigger. In a fight, he could beat him. So we're still going to depend on the Nile for life, but we'll depend on God to kind of keep the God of... Do you understand what I'm saying? And in these statements, the Lord your God is one. He doesn't say one and only. And in his revelations of himself, I'm just raising the issue of why I want you to think about, as we explore this, why didn't he just come out and say, there's only one God, no other gods exist, I'm the one and only, you either serve me or you die on your own because there's no hope outside of me. Now, if you want to turn to Exodus chapter 8, if I were a good teacher, I would have these on the screens for you, but I'm not a good teacher. Don't ever accuse me of being one. Exodus 8, verse 10. Then he said tomorrow, so he said, may it be according to your word that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. Now that suggests he's unique, but not that he's only. Isaiah 45, verse 4, I am the Lord, and there is no other. Beside me, there is no God. Now, by inspiration, Isaiah is revealing to us God is making this statement of being the only, but he didn't do that long before. He didn't do that when he created male and female in his image. Let us create male and female. And guys, what I want you to understand is there's confusion about the nature of God himself. And I mean capital G, God. There's confusion about, because so many people come to it with a polytheistic view because of multiculturalism, multi-religion, all of that kind of stuff. And in our culture, we're propagating that. That, have you seen the bumper stickers that coexist, and it's got all the symbols of all the different religions, and the idea, and those symbols spell out coexist, which means get along. Get along with all religions and their gods, because everybody has a right to their gods, etc. So God says, have no other gods before me. In Exodus 20, verse 3, we read, "And you shall not make for yourself any idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or earth below. You shall not worship them or serve them. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous." It can also be translated zealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands. Isaiah 44, and we're going to end with this one. Isaiah's going to talk about how ludicrous it is to create a God. Verse 12, Isaiah 44, "The man shapes iron into a cutting tool, and does his work over the coats, fashioning it with hammers, working it with his strong arm. He also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes, outlines with a compass, makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of a man, so that it may sit in a house. Surely he cuts cedar for himself, takes a cypress or an oak, raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir, the rains make it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn. So he can take one of them and warm himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes it a graven image and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this half he eats meat as he roasts a roast and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, 'Aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire.' But the rest of it he makes into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worships. He also prays to it and says, 'Deliver me, for thou art my God.'" That last verse is human expectation of God. Deliver me. Somebody needs to be in control of my life, and I can't control it. Somebody needs to be in control of my world, my environment, etc. Or we live in absolute chaos, therefore life is meaningless. That's why humans create gods. Now, what Isaiah is trying to show, you go out and get a cedar or fir or whatever, you get a nice tree, you cut it down, cut half of it, make firewood, bake your bread over it, and get warmed up, and the other half you make into a god. Now, the problem here, what if you get the halves switched? What if you're burning your god? See, he's showing how ludicrous this is, but he's also showing humans take pride in their ability to build. They take pride in their ability to construct. So they take pride in the gods that they create. But what they fail to understand, whoever creates the god is actually God. And that gets back to the statements of humans just wanting to do what they want to do. I want deliverance, but I want to design that. And so you end up in a feudalistic circle. The God creator is actually God, but the God creator is inept. He cannot find his way. He cannot deliver himself. It's futile. Now, there is a religion that rather than having gods, they have saints. They have saints over travel. They have saints over procedures. They have saints over, what are some of the saints over? Health. If you believe in the saint of travel, it was not uncommon to have a figurine of that saint on your dashboard. I've been in taxis where the driver had a figurine of the saint over transportation. And the idea is this saint is going to appeal to God on behalf of the driver. He's the saint over driving because God doesn't have time for that. So he makes saints, I would suggest to you, sub-gods, because if they're saint over travel, they have to be miraculous. Do you see how it permeates even one God? And it's so subtle, it takes us by surprise. Now, guys, next time we're going to conclude this thing, and I want to talk specifically about idolatrous Christianity. The most perverse form of idolatry is Christians creating God in their image. And we, Christendom, do that. And that is serious business. Let's take a break and get ready for our assembly.